We're talking to Gabe Roth, who is the executive director of Fix the Court. Now, Gabe, first of all, Gabe, how are you doing tonight?
Hi. I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm at the point where I go, I'm fine. That's what I say to people when they ask me how I am. Fine. It's fine. It's great.
I feel you.
Yes.
I hear you.
So, first of all, I know we've spoken before, and I want to reintroduce you to the audience. Where are you from? Where are you from originally?
Originally from Nashville, but I went to school in St. Louis for undergrad and Chicago for grad school. Okay. So, I've got a journalism degree from Northwestern, and then I've just worked in news for a bit, and then moved over to politics, and now I've been running my own nonprofit, Fix the Court, for about 10 years now.
Oh, man. See, now my son goes to U Chicago, and he was kind of thinking about journalism, and look, there's a lot of different backgrounds for undergrad that you can use to go in that direction, but I love that you took what a lot of us go, oh God, what's happening with journalism? And you said, I have a vision. What inspired you to create Fix the Court?
It was, a lot of it was just coincidence. So after I left journalism, I was working at a political consulting firm in D.C., and a lot of the clients that I had doing PR and consulting work ended up having cases in federal court. So we had a group of lawyers that wanted to close Guantanamo, which unfortunately is back in the news, that we did some PR support for. We had a group of folks working to strengthen the Voting Rights Act. We had a same-sex couple, that were fighting for marriage. And these are all clients of one of these big DC firms that I worked at. And all these issues came up before the federal courts. And with my background in broadcast journalism, I asked the question, why are there no cameras in the Supreme Court? Why are there no cameras in most, if not all, of the lower courts? So it started it was just trying to get broadcast access, live streaming. I mean, when I worked in Chicago, I just remember being so lazy at the time. I was in South Clark Street in the Dirksen building, which is the Kluzinski building, where the Seventh Circuit is just across the street. And I'm like, why do I have to go there to cover whichever governor was being indicted at the time? It's hard to remember. I think it was Ryan. Why do I have to go across the street for jury selection? Why can't I just live stream it? So that sort of stuck in me. I was back in 2005, and I started Fix the Court in 2014. So that always sort of stuck with me. And then, I started just doing the live, pushing for the live streaming, which I'm still doing. And I mean, even today, actually, it'll be tomorrow that 5 of these Trump orders and directives that are, that folks are trying to stop. 5 of the 35 cases are going to have hearings tomorrow, and each of them is going to be live streamed, which is good. But it's sort of expanded over time to add issues where also the federal courts are really not up to snuff in terms of modern expectations of government transparency and accountability. So it's everything from lack of strong ethics rules and recusal rules and conflict of interest rules to the fact that Supreme Court justices have life tenure and they really shouldn't have, and we don't know when they're appearing in public and who they're speaking with and who they're talking to. So, it started as just a sort of little project to try to get live streaming the courts, and it expanded to sort of a larger project to try to bring the federal judiciary, the entire third branch of our federal government, kicking and screaming into the 21st century.
Man, oh man, do we need it? And have you basically felt like you've earned a law degree through all of these experiences?
I do. When people are critical of me in the news, they'll say like, Gabe Roth doesn't even have a law degree, and it's like you don't need one to do a lot of the work that I do. I mean, I think you can learn via experience, and I've had good mentors. I've read as much as I can, and when people ask me to draft legislation, they're not like checking, what I got on my LSAT or whether or not I have a JD. They know that I've, someone that comes from, sort of a bipartisan background and can work with Democrats and Republicans, try to get to the right solution. And I'm pretty glad that I didn't go to law school, because I'm doing more law than most of my friends who went to law school, and I am not in debt like them. So, there you go.
And I mean, I don't know, how many of your friends are a little bit askew? I mean, like I remember telling a friend of mine who was an attorney, he actually appeared in front of the Supreme Court twice, Greg Adamski, who had a lot of, so you know who Greg is. Yeah, who Greg was. We were friends, and then maybe someday we'll talk about this. Maybe when you're passing through Chicago, we'll have coffee or something. But very weird connection there with Greg Adamski. But, I told him that I had wanted to go to law school, and wide-eyed, he said, don't do it. Now, here's, right, a wildly successful attorney who had a lot of high-profile cases, I mean, globally even, and he was like, he wasn't sure he had made the right choice. Are your friends like that too?
Yeah, no, a lot. I mean, my best friend does works in the family business, which has nothing to do with law. It's more, buying and selling different packaged products out in LA. I have another close friend who he works at CNN as a lawyer. So there is him, and another friend actually just saw today on LinkedIn, got, because too modest, didn't want to tell me, but just got promoted at Marriott. So doing law stuff. So another friend who's in law, went into real estate. I mean, a lot of people, when I graduated college in 2004, were just getting the JDs because at that time, it was we were post the 9/11 recession, pre the 2008 recession. Economy was good. Law bonuses were huge. And for people, poli-sci majors like me that didn't know what they wanted to do, a lot of people went to law school. And I think, it's for the right type of person. It can be the right type of job, but, such a small percentage of your time is actually spent in a courtroom. That's what I love from growing up watching Law and Order and all these other shows. Yeah. Such a small percentage of your time is actually spent in a courtroom that to me, like sitting behind a desk and just typing out like 100-page briefs, which are not brief. Not sure why they called that. Didn't go to law school, so I don't know why they're called briefs. They're long as hell. That's actually one of the big things that we're trying to do this year is make access to federal court filings free. Currently, it costs 10 cents a page to read a single sheet of paper filed by a lawyer in a federal court case on your computer. Even though it's a static PDF, the federal courts still charge you 10 cents a page, and they make like $150 million from Americans each year. Yeah, it's a system called PACER, and there's a bill that's going to be bipartisan. Hopefully, it'll come out next month to sort of change the way the payment system works. In that, for the average American, it'll be free. So that would be pretty exciting, especially given that we've got 35 different lawsuits filed against Trump directives. People's PACER fees are racking up pretty quickly in the early part of 2025.
Wow, and that money goes to where? To the branch?
To the federal courts. The federal courts use it for all sorts of things, some of which are illegal. There was actually a class action lawsuit against the federal courts because some lawyers got word that they were using the money illegal, and they won the case. So now they're sort of figuring out, how best to spend the money, but they're using whatever extra they make to sort of beef up their IT and beef up their security and beef up all these things, which that's fine if you want to do that, but be like every other part of government and ask Congress for that funding. You don't get this slush fund, which you say is for security, but in reality, maybe only 30 or 40% of it is going to that. So where is the rest of the money going? It doesn't cost $100 million to run a website of static PDFs, which is all in HTML, the pages of dockets. It's very, you and I could sit down over the coffee that we're going to have and pay a contractor $1 million to set it up, not 150. So, that's a big a boondoggle, and one of the many just things that, starting out, I never thought. I thought it'd be cameras in the court. I didn't realize it was going to be PACER. Another big thing we're pushing this year is to strengthen the workplace conduct protections for federal court employees. A lot of federal court employees, clerks, judicial assistants, this is their first job out of college or their first job out of law school. A lot of people in their 20s, sometimes 30s, and there's very strange power dynamics in courthouses. And so, a lot of these individuals are taken advantage of, and they don't have the same recourses in federal law that you or I or, say, a congressional staffer have. The judiciary actually lobbied to have themselves written out of a lot of anti-harassment, anti-discrimination, and whistleblower protection laws. So that's insane that happened, but it happened when, I don't know, I was in middle school when it happened, so I, take no responsibility there, but it happened. And so we need to fix it. And, the part of the Me Too movement revealed that some of that harassment took place in courthouses. And this is sort of, we're following that to try to get to the point where the judiciary and the staff have the same protections that other folks in D.C. have. So that's another, again, no law degree starting out because I think we should all be able to watch the Seventh Circuit and the Supreme Court online, but now, doing some interesting things to try to make the courts more open and accountable.
Do you think, because I think about, I imagine all those memories I have and continue to have, seeing the portrayals of judges, right? From like Absence of Malice is one of my, not Absence of Malice, The Verdict. The Verdict is one of my favorite movies with Paul Newman.
Yes.
And also Absence of Malice is funny because that's a journalism movie. So I kind of combine those.
That is a journalism movie. It's all good. It's all good.
It's all,
I mean, that's sort of one of the reasons that I got so interested in the courts to begin with, is like I went to an oral argument at the Supreme Court, I don't know, 12 or some odd years ago, and I went to some in the Seventh Circuit down in the Loop, and especially the Supreme Court level, like they're all incredibly interesting and they're all really well done, and there's a ton of decorum and a ton of, there's some pomp and circumstance. And you're sort of crammed in there. It's a pretty small room, and they try to fit like 430 people there on argument day. And so, in terms of when you stand and what the Supreme Court police say and what the marshal says and all the, in the bar, there's all these bar admissions, and then sometimes they read opinions in addition to hearing oral argument. Sometimes they hear more than one oral argument in a day. And it's just a really impressive half an hour, hour and a half, however long it takes, that every American should see. And I think, as much as I have a lot of issues with the Supreme Court, I think that especially right now, as, one branch of the government is trying to sort of, change the way democracy works, and another branch of government is just abdicating its power to stop some of that. We really are relying on the court. So, I'm trying to buck them up to do the right thing in a lot of these cases. But, in each of these instances that I've been to the Supreme Court, as much as you may dislike a single justice or a whole set of justices, the actual process of deciding these cases, I think, is really impressive and something that every American should see. And it would, maybe make them a little prouder to be part of this experiment and want to uphold it more, because, we're obviously at a very scary inflection point right now.
I wonder how much you have looked at and are working on the impact of whether it's the Heritage Foundation or people like Harlan Crow or any of the other influences that we have learned about. And it's interesting because there were pieces written over a decade ago about Harlan Crow, about the Heritage Foundation, about the Federalist Society. And I guess it just wasn't interesting or juicy enough for us to go, to even blink at the fact that there were all of these outside influencers like Mark Paoletta, who I don't know if you saw this, is now getting the spotlight on him because of the he's the legal counsel for OMB and that federal pause last week. So go ahead. I'm sorry, because he's had a lot of impact on this entire court. Anyway, yes.
He has. Yeah, no, it's if you're best friends with a justice, you get to have that impact. It is interesting. Look, the justices have been lobbied. They've had friends. They've had entanglements and prior experiences since the founding. There's, the famous case, Marbury versus Madison. The Chief Justice, which said, it's the prominence of the judiciary to say what the law is. Like, the Chief Justice who wrote that case signed some of the commissions that were at issue in that case, and he should have recused from that case. So, sort of the quintessential case that the Supreme Court has ever decided should not have been decided the way it was because there was a missed recusal. So, the ethics of the court are sort of woven into its very history. But to your point, I think there are definitely some malign actors that in the last few years have really ramped up this project, right? The things that conservatives could not achieve through the legislature or through the executive branch, they've decided that they were going to take on the project of changing the courts, and through some skill and some combination of that with luck in terms of when certain justices died and when certain justices didn't die or retire, they've been able to do that to a large extent. I apologize for the helicopters in the background, but that's living near the nation's capital. You get that a lot. Hope everyone's okay tonight. But so I think that that's. It's hard to understate that impact. The fact that, look, personally, do I think that Harlan Crow or even the Heritage Foundation or FedSop changed Thomas's mind on any single case, I don't think so. I mean, there are people that disagree with me. That's fine. I think that, the movement is where the movement is, and Thomas is conservative, so they're going to come to conservative outcomes. That being said, I do think what it is, having this sort of, the billionaire buddy system, as Senator Whitehouse likes to say, it just sort of gives a permission structure, or just like makes it okay to sort of, push them, in that direction. So, okay, you're gonna it's one thing to decide a case 6-3 or 5-4 with the obvious conservative outcome. I mean, you're calling it originalism, but it's whatever the average conservative would want. It's another thing to sort of push the envelope and to write a separate concurrence or to write a separate opinion in a case that's 8-1 or 7-2 the other way. So sort of ceding the ground. So 5 years from now, we're overturning this landmark decision called Humphrey's Executor that doesn't allow the president to fire folks from, say, like the National Labor Relations Board, which he did, which is illegal. Mm-hmm. But because there's some like Thomas concurrence from 3 years ago that says, we should end this Humphrey's Executor case. Well, when the case goes to SCOTUS, as it inevitably will, Thomas is going to write a 6-3 opinion saying, the firing was legal. So that's something to look forward to. But I think it just gives this, in addition to helping the justices stay on the court, right? Justice Thomas, pled penury to a member of Congress at one point saying, too much, I don't know what the non-Yiddish word for tsuris is, but it's too much tsuris staying on the court, too much aggravation staying on the court. Why would I do this for a mere $200,000 a year or whatever the salary was? Yeah. So, that helps, keep them on the court and keep them happy and keep them fed. And so, and Scalia had all these trips. I mean, Scalia really pioneered the whole billionaire buddy program through a series of hunting trips during his 30 years on the court. And so it's Alito to a lesser extent, but overall, that is a really, I mean, it's well documented. There's a group called Documented actually that documents it, and another group called True North Research, and a group called Core Accountability. These are the ones that have looked into it, and they really, along with ProPublica and us to some extent as well, but we're more nonpartisan. But I think that overall, it's definitely had a negative impact on American jurisprudence. I think that most of what we do in this country should be determined by our elected officials, and they're not always great and they're not always perfect. But, I'd like our judges to hew between the 40-yard lines, to use a football metaphor, a few days before the Super Bowl. I think the judges should pretty much stay close to the middle of the field. And when you have individuals pushing for the justices in a certain direction, I mean, maybe, or pushing for appointments of individuals who would go in that certain direction, and the justice is taking the ball and running with it to the far ends of the field, to continue the metaphor. Mm-hmm. I think that's a problem for the American people, and that's where we're at, unfortunately.
And there's the oversight, right? We talk about this. We talk about our own Senator Dick Durbin, and demanding more information and hearings and things like that, and really nothing coming from it, because it does appear to us that they're just simply untouchable, and our demands for accountability and transparency are just nonsense. That's what it feels like to us, and I guess that doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that you have to, and especially when you talk on the Senate side, you have to be able to get to 60, right? You have a then chair, now ranking member Durbin of the Judiciary Committee sending in subpoenas to Leonard Leo and Harlan Crow, and it's one thing to issue a subpoena, but to enforce it, I mean, you really need 60 votes in the Senate. I mean, there are certain theories that maybe you could get a court to do it, or maybe that you could do it through 51 votes in some way. But most all business that happens in the Senate has to happen with the blessing of 60 senators. And there were only, I think, 51 Democratic senators in the last Congress, and 9 Republicans weren't willing to join with them. So, I mean, that's part of the problem. I mean, if I'm being honest, I mean, part of my job is like, I wish I could, I joke about this, but I wish there was a Sotomayor or a Kagan or a Jackson scandal just waiting to be uncovered that I could unleash into the world, and then maybe Republicans would care more about judiciary oversight. There isn't. There's very minor things at the margins that I've found in terms of gifts and speaking engagements and other things. But it's not to the extent that we've had with the conservative justices, namely Thomas, Scalia, and a little bit Alito. It completely pales in comparison. And if we're only doing oversight when the other side is acting impetuously, we're never going to do oversight, right? Any time that a judge, if you look at the lower courts, it's closer to even in terms of who is taking the gifts and the trips. It's still more conservatives than liberals, but it's a little more even. So, maybe there's hope there. But, unfortunately, we're at this sort of, bloodbath endgame that, I only care about what's good for my team as opposed to what's good for the country. And I think obviously we're seeing that now through some of these plausibly, if not obviously, illegal actions that the Trump administration is doing. But I think that sort of, has trickled across all three branches and has infected this sort of any desire to act in a bipartisan matter in judicial accountability. And that's been very, very sad to see.
Man, I could talk to you for an hour. And hopefully, and I don't want, you have a lot of work to do. This is a lot. How do you relax? I can't, knowing as much as you do, right? Being as close to it as you are, because so much hangs in the balance. And again, I know that you'd come at this from a nonpartisan point of view. And like you said, if there were a story to chase with any of the three judges that are considered to be liberal, I know that I mentioned Mark Paoletta. I know every time they would question his best friend, his RV driving buddy, on these, yacht trips, and he's the one in the middle of that picture with all the bourbon and the Native American behind them. Every time, he would roll out this story about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and something about her husband, and then sometimes, it pales in comparison, the umbrage they take. It's not even.
And what's so funny is that the examples that they have are liberal judges from the 60s or the 70s or the 90s. His Ginsburg examples are all things that she did or didn't do. So she said a few mean things about Trump. Okay, she apologized. But the other examples that he uses, her husband did some legal work for Ross Perot.
Yes.
Who's thought about Ross Perot in 30 years?
Yeah.
Things, think theoretically, we're in a better place ethically, or we're moving towards a better place ethically. Obviously, again, big caveat, the last couple of weeks have sort of taken us back to the early 1800s. But, generally, we think we're, moving towards a more lowercase p progressive society, a more inclusive society, a more diverse society, a more ethical society. And then, using a barometer of what was okay or what wasn't okay in 1993 to compare to the $500,000 yacht trip that Justice Thomas took a few years ago. It's just it's the wrong barometer, and it's by magnitudes of hundreds of times is what Thomas has done versus say someone like Ginsburg. Which is not to say that I haven't called out Ginsburg. He knows my address. He's more than welcome to go to fixthecourt.com and see all the nasty grams I wrote about Ginsburg in 2016 when she was calling out Trump. They're all there. But the point is that, again, if it's only, we only care about this because, we only care about ethics when the other side is messing up. It's similar to what you've seen in the Biden administration. Merrick Garland, his DOJ, prosecuted Bob Menendez, prosecuted a ton of New York politicos who are all Democrats, prosecuted a congressman from Texas who's a Democrat, prosecuted Hunter Biden, who's a Democrat. So, I'm not saying that if Democrats go back in power, they should only go after corrupt Republicans. I think that would be ridiculous. But I just think that a lot of times Republicans only see corruption as a one-way street when it just really just impugns our entire democracy in ways that, especially at the Supreme Court level, could be irreversible.
Well, that's not what you said, but it's because their corruption is only one way. Anyway, I do want to thank you. Gabe, how do we support, we're talking to Gabe Roth with Fix the Court. How do we support the work that you do and learn more about what you're sharing with folks and pushing for when it comes to reforming our judicial system?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. We're just, fixthecourt.com. I'm just Gabe at fixthecourt.com if you want to chat. And on the website there's a fixthecourt.com/sign-up for the sign up page, fixthecourt.com/donate. It's all on the homepage, and we're on Twitter and Blue Sky, and I think that's it. I'm 42. I can't handle more than 2 social media pages at a time. And my staff, they're all in their 20s, and I'm like, just enjoy. So if you have social media, just enjoy it. I don't want to make you do this for work. Like, I'll do it. I'll like put the updates in. I'm not going to, poison your mind with having to like see what the latest, Truth Social post is. So you're fine. But yeah, so we're on Twitter and Blue Sky at Fix the Court. And appreciate the plug and for the chat.
Absolutely. And thank you again. We look forward to talking to you whenever your schedule allows. And I really need you to do some self-care, because this is a lot. You are in the
Super Bowl this weekend. My wife's a Chiefs fan. We're very excited.
Oh, excellent. Go Chiefs. I'm down with that.
Chiefs.
Go Chiefs.
There
Excellent.
We go.
Well, enjoy, and we look forward to talking to you again. And if anything comes that you want to share with our audience, please don't hesitate. But yeah, we're going to beg you to come back. I'm just saying.
Thank you so much. Always great talking to you.
Thank you. Have a good evening,
well.
and go Chiefs. All right.
You too.